Recently, the President and First Lady of the United States visited Saudi Arabia, and Michelle Obama inspired a bit of a fuss by not wearing a head covering, which is part of the mandatory dress code for women around those parts. Now, most of the fussing was done by people in this country. The outrage of Saudi officials and citizens seems to have been exaggerated somewhat. Reports of the Saudi king refusing to shake the First Lady's hand, or of her image being blurred on Saudi television, turned out to be untrue. King Salman did shake her hand. She was shown on TV, uncovered head and all, and apparently she and her husband were treated with the respect that is typically afforded visiting dignitaries. The First Lady's attire didn't turn out to be as controversial in the theocratic absolute monarchy of Saudi Arabia as some of us apparently hoped it would be, but Michelle Obama is far from the only woman to defy the Islamic custom requiring women to cover their heads. Last year, this YouTube video, appearing to show an Iranian woman dancing and removing her hijab, went viral. There's also a Facebook page, My Stealthy Freedom, with over 750,000 likes that encourages Iranian women to post photos of themselves without the hijab. This has all got me thinking about how significantly our attitudes toward gender are shaped by religion. We can see extreme examples of this in the United States, and the strict, some would say oppressive gender roles imposed on women by certain sects of fundamentalist Christianity or Orthodox Judaism, where women are discouraged or in some cases outright forbidden from pursuing education or holding certain jobs, cutting their hair, or dressing in a certain way. But religious traditions influence our assumptions and expectations regarding gender in ways far deeper and broader than these. Let's take, for example, the traditional gender role of the woman as the homemaker and the primary caregiver to children. Thanks to evolutionary happenstance, women are the ones who bear the children, so from a purely biological perspective, it makes sense for women to assume this role. But most of us aren't living as hunter-gatherers these days. Our biology no longer shapes our lives as irresistibly as it did the lives of our ancient ancestors. Nonetheless, the idea of mother and homemaker as a woman's proper place is still with us. I think this is due in large part to religion, which has not only institutionalized this role as a woman's proper place, but imparted to it the character of a divine command. Within this framework, the notion that a woman's place is in the home isn't merely a cultural byproduct of our biological evolution that modern women can feel free to disregard if it suits them. It's a mandate from the Almighty. There are other gender-based assumptions that religion serves to reinforce, that wives are to be subservient to their husbands, that women are not to be made leaders or teachers, that a woman's consent isn't necessary or at least is not as important as a man's when it comes to sex. And it's not only women who are harmed by this. Yes, women are the more dehumanized of the two, but it's men who are shaped by these traditions into the dehumanizers. It's also these traditional religiously supported gender roles that tell men that it's for them and them alone to earn a living to support their families or to go off and fight the wars, tasks with which women are both able and willing to help out. The damage done to men may not be as apparent or as severe, but it's definitely there. That's why I think that to liberate women from gender inequality is also to liberate men. Religion reinforces these gender roles through both scripture and tradition. The expectations for how Michelle Obama would or should dress during her visit to Saudi Arabia were based on Islamic traditions, but I'll take Christianity as my example since that is a far greater influence in my part of the world. The Bible places women in the inferior position both implicitly and explicitly. In the book of Genesis, it is Eve, the woman, who first succumbs to temptation, damning the rest of humanity, not the man. In Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 and 17, God punishes Eve by giving her pains in childbirth and declaring that she is to be commanded by her husband. Adam's punishment, which is essentially to have to go out and work for a living, is framed as being the result of him having listened to his wife. Women are depicted as deceivers, corrupters, tempters. At best, they're afterthoughts, considered barely if at all, even in contexts where they would seem to be at least as important as the men, such as marriage and adultery. And, probably because Eve couldn't be trusted alone with a snake in the Garden of Eden, they're considered unfit for positions of authority. The author of the New Testament's first epistle to Timothy, traditionally said to be Paul, but almost certainly not Paul, declares that women should dress modestly, keep their mouths shut, and never assume authority over a man. The author of 1 Timothy also cautions against helping widows, unless they're poor, childless, extremely pious, and old. Young widows are nothing but trouble. Some forms of modern Christianity attempt to accommodate the ever-increasing demand for gender equality by proposing a division of labor, where men and women have different, distinctly defined roles which are presented as equally important, a kind of separate but equal doctrine for gender politics. Yes, it's true that men are divinely ordained to be the leaders of the family and the church and the community, but hey, they couldn't do it without the invaluable support of their wives and their mothers. Thanks, moms. There's a note not only of condescension but of desperation in this. It's spin. It's a church trying to placate people who want to see more progressive gender attitudes represented without having to actually change anything. And some forms of modern Christianity, it must be said, have chosen to accommodate these evolving attitudes toward gender by allowing their own attitudes to evolve as well. My wife and I were married by a woman who is the pastor of the Lutheran Church in the town where we grew up. Many denominations of Christianity now allow women to serve as clergy. Additionally, the more progressive strands of Judaism ordain women rabbis, and woman imams are becoming increasingly common in Islam. In the West, at least. So religion works to maintain these gender roles by telling us that they're natural and just and divinely determined. And when religious institutions do adopt more modern gender attitudes, they're responding to changes in the culture at large, not leading that culture by their example. But even though religion has done more than any other institution to hold back progress in this area and to establish male-dominated gender inequality as the social norm, I think it's a bit of a cop-out to simply blame religion. As an atheist, I consider religion, all religion, to be a wholly human invention, which means that we aren't reflecting God's sexism and misogyny. God is reflecting ours, or that of our ancestors anyway. Religions take the attitudes of their founders and declare them to be the transcendent, unchanging attitudes that ought to be shared by all people for all time to come. When those founders lived thousands of years ago, as in the cases of Judaism and Christianity, or even hundreds of years ago, as is the case with Islam, that can be a problem. It's particularly a problem where women are concerned, since the most significant progress in gender equality didn't really start to happen until about 100 years ago, and because those negative attitudes toward women are so deeply ingrained in the scriptures and traditions of the major Abrahamic faiths. But those ideas are there because people put them there, not because they represent how things are supposed to be. People put them there, and it's up to people to get rid of them. One uncovered head at a time, if necessary.